Hi, welcome to Progressive News. It's Friday, December 13th, 2019.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're reporting from the UN Climate Summit in Madrid, Spain. In global news, the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party won a landslide victory during Thursday's decisive national election, dealing a devastating blow to Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. Corbyn has said he'll step down as head of the party after a period of reflection. It was the Labour Party's worst electoral defeat in 84 years. The Conservatives are projected to win 364 seats in the British House of Commons versus only 203 for the Labour Party. This would give the Conservatives the largest majority since 1987, when Margaret Thatcher was in power. This is Labour Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell.
Look, I know they're heartbroken, I know that, so am I. They worked incredibly hard, incredibly dedicated. We have setbacks like this in our movement, but it isn't down to them or any lack of commitment. Brexit was the issue for us.
The Conservative Party's sweeping victory all but guarantees Brexit, Britain's departure from the European Union early next year. The party won resoundingly despite Prime Minister Boris Johnson being accused of Islamophobia, xenophobia, and sexual harassment. We'll have more on the British elections after headlines with British journalist George Monbiot and Cambridge University lecturer Priya Gopal. On Capitol Hill, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, unexpectedly called off a vote on the 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump after a 14-hour debate in the committee Thursday.
Long 2 days of consideration of these articles, and it is now very late at night. I want the members on both sides of the aisle to think about what has happened over these last 2 days and to search their consciences before we cast our final votes.
Congressmember Jerry Nadler has now rescheduled the vote for today at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The first article of impeachment, abuse of power, centers on how President Trump withheld military aid from Ukraine to pressure the Ukrainian president to investigate Trump's political rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Democratic lawmakers say Trump then tried to cover up his actions, leading to the second article of impeachment, obstruction of Congress. Democracy Now! Will be live streaming the impeachment hearing today at our website, democracynow.org. In Algeria, thousands of people have taken to the streets to denounce Thursday's presidential election as a farce.
The elections must fall. There are no elections. These people are the elections. No to elections in these conditions. These people are heroes.
Activists called for people to boycott Thursday's presidential election to replace Algeria's longtime president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who was forced from power by a mass uprising in April. There was record low participation in Thursday's election, and early results suggest no candidate received the 50% of votes needed to win outright. Protesters say all 5 candidates represent a continuation of Algeria's corrupt ruling elite. Earlier this week, 2 previous Algerian prime ministers were convicted and sentenced to prison over a corruption scandal that also ensnared other top government officials and businessmen in Algeria. Burma's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, has asked the International Court of Justice at The Hague to drop the genocide case against Burma.
Myanmar requests the court to remove the case from its list. In the alternative, to reject the request for the indication of provisional measures submitted by the Gambia.
During the International Court hearings, the former Nobel Peace Prize winner repeatedly tried to deny the Burmese military has carried out genocide against the Muslim Rohingya, although she never once used the word Rohingya during her speeches. The Burmese military killed and raped thousands of Rohingya and forced more than 700,000 to flee into neighboring Bangladesh in a brutal army crackdown in 2017. In India, police killed at least 2 protesters in the state of Assam amid massive demonstrations against the Citizenship Amendment Bill. which many have denounced as a major step toward the official marginalization of India's 200 million Muslims. The upper house of parliament has passed the highly controversial legislation which provides a path to citizenship for immigrants from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, unless they're Muslim. The government's also arrested hundreds of protesters, cut off internet access, imposed curfews in parts of northeast India amidst ongoing protests against the citizenship bill. In Iraq, thousands of anti-government protesters have gathered in Baghdad's Tahrir Square to demand the nationwide protest movement in Iraq remain peaceful and to condemn the brutal killing of a teenager on Thursday. The 16-year-old was stabbed to death and his body was strung up from a traffic pole after rumors circulated he killed a number of anti-government demonstrators. It appears he'd actually fired a gun into the air to try to convince demonstrators to stop protesting near his family's home. Police officers stood by during the teenager's killing and allowed it to take place. The leaders of the ongoing protests quickly condemned the attack. Meanwhile, the United Nations has condemned the Iraqi government for killing, arresting, and abducting anti-government protesters during the ongoing demonstrations. Security forces and militias have killed over 400 protesters, and human rights advocates say a number of prominent activists have been disappeared. In France, protests are continuing today as workers remain on strike to protest French President Emmanuel Macron's pension overhaul. Unions are vowing to continue the strike into the holiday period, saying the proposal to effectively raise the retirement age is a red line that cannot be crossed. This is 31-year-old train conductor Cécile Ratour, who is participating in the strike.
I continue to fight for our pension.
Okay, I just want to say something about Iraq. Obviously, Saddam Hussein brutally controlled all this before he was in, so that isn't an option. I'm not condoning the United States, but you know, we could have, I don't know, set up a better system. The United States is guilty in terms of we cut a deal with the Shia to get 75% of the oil profits, so that's definitely squeezing their country. As a matter of fact, all these countries, that's the issue, you know, the oil. And like in Venezuela, the reason they kicked us out, or in Bolivia, or any of these other places where you got left-wing governments come in, they promised to use the oil to help the people. Well, they helped the people, but the United States sanctioned and blockaded their oil so that they couldn't sell it, so that we could sell oil, you know. I mean, everything we do, everything the United States, it's the capitalist, you know, the 0.01% who are screwing up the whole world, really, is what it comes down to. And that includes the United States. You know, they've screwed the United States, too, from the very beginning.
Pensions because what Prime Minister Philippe said was rubbish. It's a blatant smokescreen. They want to divide and conquer. They want to divide the generations.
In Hong Kong, thousands of people took to the streets Thursday to mark 6 months since the pro-democracy protest movement's first major clash with police, when demonstrators prevented lawmakers from advancing an extradition bill that sparked the protests. While the extradition bill has since been scrapped, the demonstrations have continued to rock Hong Kong, with nearly 1 million people marching the
See those American flags? This is another example of where the United States is paying money to cause discontent. You know, China is, at the end of this month, they're claiming they're going to have zero poverty in China. They have used capitalism to create the communist state that they wanted. It's genius, really, what they've done with their billion and a half people or whatever it is. You know, to be able to overcome poverty. And in Hong Kong, you've got a very complicated situation. You've got the United States and mainly Great Britain. And I got to tell you, Great Britain is the biggest problem. They are the source. I mean, they just had an election today, and it just proves how racist they are. Because that's all that today's vote showed us, is that it's a racist country. And, you know, I went to Oxford. I remember the racist jokes that they used to tell. I remember one was, okay, there's a group of Pakistanis and they've just come in illegally and they're on the coast and they walk to the nearest highway, which is like the M4 or something. And one of them says, well, I saw this in a movie, let's try it. It's called hitchhiking. So he gets out there with his thumb and sticks his thumb up, and you know, all the cars just go past and don't pick any of them up. So they say, I got an idea, let's lay in the road like we're hurt and we'll see what happens. And so first car comes by and thump thump, so it kills the guy, right? And of course the British who were telling me this, actually a guy from Wales, thought it was hilariously funny, you know. Some British person just ran over some poor migrant, right? And that goes on for a little while, and then finally a semi truck comes through and it goes dum 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 dum. You know, oh, that's funny, that's funny. And then finally they lay one guy out, and all of a sudden a car comes, a big Rolls Royce, and it goes dum dum. Dum dum. Dum dum. And so that's Margaret Thatcher. That's her car. So it's running over the dead guy multiple times. And I don't really see anything funny in that. I mean, I understand how racists would find it funny, but I just want to explain to you that is why the Tories won today. And we'll get more into, you know, the loss that Labour had today after these headlines. Which, by the way, it's Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. And, you know, I just put it in there as an overall view of the news today.
Past Sunday to demand more democracy. This is a college student at Thursday's march.
This movement is not the end, because just a whole beginning.
And in fact, Hong Kong never had democracy under the British United States. So this is all bullshit, right? And they actually have democracy now. They have elections. They just won a big election. So this isn't about democracy. The democracy movement won when the Chinese took over the island. They never had democracy before then. Now they have democracy since the Chinese took over. So it's nothing to do with democracy. What it's got to do with is the United States and Britain and Europe funding people to try and take back the island from China.
Because we have a lot of work to do. Also, we think that this movement need to, and we call more people to against some kind of some government which is very evil and is what is against the human rights.
And poverty is already a problem there because the Chinese don't actually run it right now. It's an autonomous thing, and people are living awful. The rents are so high that they haven't really reported anywhere on homelessness, but people are living in little tiny like closets.
Back in the United States, a shocking Department of Homeland Security memo obtained by BuzzFeed News reveals how inadequate medical care contributed to the deaths of at least 4 immigrants in the custody of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. The memo includes revelations from an ICE whistleblower about how one man died from meningitis.
And yeah, I mean, this is the issue, right? It's not an issue of how many people we let become American citizens, of what race and stuff, although that is an issue, but the immigration issue right now is far worse than that. It's about how we're treating people at the border.
After grossly negligent care. The whistleblower also said official reports on one of the 4 deaths were very misleading. The DHS memo also includes reports of immigrants being administered incorrect medication or being given such grossly inadequate medical care they had to have preventable surgeries. One of the victims of medical neglect was an 8-year-old child whose rare infection inside his skull was misdiagnosed as an ear infection. He was given only eardrops. A few weeks later, after the infection spread, the child had to have his frontal bones surgically removed. And President Trump has attacked Swedish 16-year-old climate activist Greta Thunberg, who has just been named Time Magazine Person of the Year. She's the youngest person to ever receive the honor. On Thursday, Trump attacked the teenager on Twitter, tweeting, quote, "Greta must work on her anger management problem, then go to a good old-fashioned movie with a friend. Chill, Greta, chill," he tweeted. In response to President Trump's attack, Greta changed her Twitter bio to mock the President of the United States.
And, you know, I have to agree to a certain extent with Trump. People are using children to further their movement. I mean, we all know, you know, this is the Twitter, YouTube revolution. Everything is laughing babies and happy cats and dancing parrots. And, you know, that's all fine for entertainment purposes, I guess, even though it shows a certain common denominator. People in the United States are so dumbed down that, you know. Anyway, children should get to live their childhood as children, right? They should get to play and have fun, and they shouldn't be used to further a movement like this. I know it's tempting, and honestly, you really think the child has had time to take in all this and understand it? So they're just using her.
Writing, quote, "A teenager working on her anger management."
And so many children now are flocking to, you know, this idea that, because obviously Greta's never going to want for anything from now on, because she's the poster child of the movement. There'll always be people who want to interview her and do stuff like that.
Problem, currently chilling and watching a good old-fashioned movie with a friend, unquote. Trump's Twitter spat with a teenager comes after President Trump did not win Time Magazine Person of the Year last year, instead being named runner-up. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.
Okay, so those are some of the headlines. Thank you, Amy Goodman.
democracy, and I'm very proud.
So this is yet another example. I mean, I applaud the woman for running all that distance for her cause, but who determines who these people are? I could run to the moon and back, and my YouTube video of it would not go viral. Okay? I mean, it's just YouTube's a joke. It really is.
Is outdated technology holding your business back?
Obviously very sad at the result we've achieved, and very sad at those colleagues that lost their seats in the election, and very sad for many people in this country who will now have a government that...
And yeah, it really is sad that the people are so racist. In the United States, you know, I'm very familiar with racism. When I worked at different places, I had people tell me, yeah, a black guy will never work at this place. And it was true, you know. And if there was a black guy working at any of the I used to go to the car dealerships and do their mobile auto body, and if there were any black people working in there, occasionally you'd see a salesman, never a manager. And you know, the people who do manage these places, they know that a right-wing, what do you call them, authoritarian, is good for them. I mean, yeah, there's a certain amount of unfairness even at that level. People lose their jobs and they end up, you know, suffering, and they don't have any kind of safety nets, especially if you've got money. But, you know, they know that they're better off with a guy like Trump. You know, and some of them enjoy the screwing of the little people, because they know that that makes their chances of making money even better. Because then they've always got people to work for them, and because people are desperate, right? And we all know what's going on with capitalism. I don't really have to belabor it here. You can watch Richard Wolff or someone like that and get an idea if you need an education on it. But the way I see it, and obviously I'm a Bernie Sanders fan, right? And as far as that goes, so maybe I agree with Trump a little bit on some different things, like with Greta Thunberg or immigration and climate change. In some ways I do, you know. I do think climate change is natural. I think it's natural for human beings to go about their business and screw up the environment. You know, pollution and everything, that's always been a side of technological advancement and population, larger and larger populations. What I object to is the fact that we know we can do it better. We know that we can collect all the pollution and possibly use it, you know, repurpose it. All of it. I know we can. But the people who are rich, they're part of this capitalist system, and all they care about is making money. So they want to just dump their waste on everybody. You know, that's the roots of the problem, right? Now, as far as the Brexit Party goes, or the Brexit Party, not the Brexit Party, Corbyn goes, and as far as I'm concerned, Sanders is in the same spot. What they're both dealing with is a country full of racists. Obviously other than the minorities. And in the United States, I think we're seeing a lot of people have a conscience. So Bernie Sanders looks like he's doing a lot better than Corbyn did. In Britain, I'd say the results, so maybe it's all about Brexit in England, right, in this election. But let's hope that more people in Britain have a conscience. Because both of these parties, Labour and Democrat in the United States, the only difference in Britain is that Labour is Labour. But they do have their centrist people, and they're screaming bloody murder right now, blaming Corbyn for everything. But I don't know about you, but I would rather be a part of a smaller party that represents having a conscience, that represents caring about your neighbors when they're down on their luck, and lifting them up, giving them obviously all the basic needs that they need to supplement their lifestyle during the times when they're down on their luck, right? If my neighbor loses his job, I don't want him to lose his house. I don't want him to lose his food. I don't want him to lose his transportation. That's not how you build the country. And as far as that goes, I think if you watch my show, you know that I don't believe in tearing down the rich, eating the rich. I believe in offering them a deal where they get out of politics, they get out of the economic system, but we guarantee them their wealth, we guarantee them their lifestyle. They'll still be able to send their kids to the best schools, go to San Moritz, in Hawaii, do all those kind of things that they do now. It's a small price to pay for the American people. And it's not really even a price, because if we keep them, their lifestyles where they're at, and we get them out of politics and economics, then we've removed the obstacle to raising up the lifestyle of first the poor. The poorest of the poor are the first ones that need to be risen up, and then the middle class, and then you end up with a country that is truly rich, because having billions of dollars in your bank account or whatever, or owning multiple companies, that's not true wealth. True wealth is when you look at a country, right? It's not the one small group of people, the rich. It's how poor your poor are, right? So you get rid of poverty, you raise the standard of living for the middle class. That's a rich country. When I can walk through any city in the United States and not find a ghetto, where I can walk through and people are happy because they're not saddled with the desperation of capitalism, because capitalists feed off of desperation, and a lot of rich really are opportunistic. I mean, they can get women because lots of women can't seem to get past this idea of, selling out to a richer guy or something. And they don't like that. I mean, they don't like if you raise up their standard of living, then women aren't going to be as likely to cater to rich people. But right now the way it is the most beautiful women run to the rich. I mean, if you're beautiful, you can almost, not all of them, there's some poor, but those poor, beautiful women know that they can get in on being, on the rich, simply because they're beautiful, and that has value to the rich. And yeah, that's just how it is.
It is continuing policies of austerity, and many of the poorest communities, I think, suffer very badly from the economic strategy that I suspect the Prime Minister will take forward. But also, I have pride in our manifesto that we put forward, and all the policies we put forward, which actually had huge public support on issues of universal credit, the green industrial revolution, and investment for the future. But this election was taken over ultimately by Brexit, and we as a party represent people who both voted Remain and Leave, and my whole strategy was to reach out beyond the Brexit divide to try and bring people together, because ultimately the country has to come together.
So what went wrong?
Well, those in Leave areas, in some numbers, voted for Brexit or Conservative candidates, which meant that we lost a number of seats and we didn't make the gains that I'd hoped we could have done, particularly in the Midlands and Yorkshire and the North.
I was listening to some callers to RBC this morning and speaking to people who are knocking on doorsteps, and the same from the Shadow Health Secretary before the election, saying the same thing, that actually you're part of the problem. Is now time to accept that perhaps your leadership may have contributed to this result?
Well, I've done everything I could to lead this party, done everything I could to develop its policies, and since I became leader, the membership has more than doubled, and the party has developed a very serious, radical yes.
And I watched a number of videos with him talking and being asked questions. And I gotta say, the local stations, all they want to do is say, hey, Corbyn, haven't you screwed up the party? Don't you think you need to move to the right? So the media in England is the same as the media in the United States. They don't want a left-wing party. In the United States, they don't want us to be the party of FDR and MLK, Martin Luther King. They don't want that, and they use every trick in the book to try and move the Democratic Party to the right. And they're really following a dictate that I've stated from the very beginning when I was a kid, and that's that if you want to win a chess game, the best way to do it is play on both sides, just one player playing the board. And that's what they get if they move that's what they, in 1992 with Clinton and the Democratic Leadership Council, that's what they did. They performed a coup on the Democratic Party, and they turned the Democratic Party, where we all had sanctuary. It was the party of FDR and MLK, and all the people who one way or another contributed, like Kennedy and Carter. I'm not going to say LBJ because he was really just completely a racist Texan. All he did was what he had to do to maintain his image. So passing civil rights. In 1965, as a Democrat, you had to pass civil rights, no matter how racist you were, because otherwise everybody in the country would have said, like, oh, the mask is off, and gone crazy, and it would have interrupted their coup. So yeah, they have both parties right now, and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and all these, Squad and whatever. There's more than that, though. There's quite a few. I just can't think of all their names right now. But they represent that attempt to overthrow the coup. And we're gaining strength and we're scaring a lot of people. Whereas in Britain, just the opposite's just happened.
But serious and fully costed manifesto, and I've received more personal abuse than any other leader has ever received by a great deal of the media. Now, that happens all the time. I will talk to our national executive about what we do in the future. I called for last night a period of reflection in the party, and obviously the ruling body of the party, our national executive, will decide what process we follow then to the election of a successor to me. But I'm quite prepared, and I was elected to do so, to lead the party until that takes place.
That some of those voters mentioned things like sympathising with the IRA, anti-Semitism, failing to deal with it, making a party that's too London-centric, and ultimately being too left-wing. Again, do you not accept that those are some of the things that have attached themselves to you that have made you less electable?
Is ending universal credit and paying the WASPy women and having a green industrial revolution too left-wing? They are huge issues that face our country, and I think our manifesto did face up to all of that. Of the attacks that have been made on me, there's an absolute evil curse within our society, and I have dealt with it. No, I don't think they are unelectable at all. I think the issue that dominated this election ultimately was Brexit. Our policies, I've named some, there were many others I could name, were actually all of them individually very popular. There was no huge debate or disagreement in the party about any of the policies in our manifesto. The issue was, ultimately, the Prime Minister said he's going to get Brexit sorted. It is, how should I put it, a mirage of nonsense, because he knows perfectly well that he's either got to get an agreement with the European Union or he's going to spend 7 years negotiating with the United States, and I'm worried about the effect on our manufacturing industry and our trading position in that period.
You don't think more centrist David Miliband kind of character could have done better, could have beaten Boris Johnson?
I don't think the result would have been any different, because we have to make an appeal to people who voted both Leave and Remain, and we appealed to all on a manifesto which would bring about more social justice in this country. And I am proud of the campaign that we fought, the effort that I put into that campaign, and the effort that hundreds of thousands of people did who saw in what we were saying, particularly a lot of young people, saw in what we're saying some hope for themselves, some future where they wouldn't go into debt just because they wanted an education.
Some of your MPs have turned on you, or your candidates who didn't get elected. I'll just quote one prominent Labour Party figure, Alan Johnson, who summed up some of the feeling when he said, "I want momentum gone." He made it sound like it was a kind of parasite that had sucked the electability out of the party. Do you accept that momentum has been this kind of internal party within a party? And how do you feel about Alan Johnson asking for it to go?
Well, I don't agree with Alan Johnson on this, and there are many candidates who are not necessarily on the left of the party who were very grateful and very happy for the support that Momentum supporters gave them in the campaign. And Momentum is an organisation of lots of people, with actually quite a wide range of political views. They see themselves as an activist base. They see themselves as people that are organising communities and community action in our society. I think that's actually a very healthy democratic development, and it's a different style of doing politics. But I think what we've shown over the past 4 years since I became leader, this growth in membership and this growth of community activism actually is healthy for politics and healthy for democracy. And I regret those kind of comments because I think they're very unfair.
Do you feel at all guilty that Boris Johnson's got another 5 years at number 10? Do you feel at all responsible and guilty for that?
I did everything I possibly could to win this election. I did everything I possibly could in order to bridge the divide between those that voted leave and those that voted remain. Because at the end of the day, they're going to live in a country where we're going to need that investment for the future. We're going to have, if this government stays in office, more homelessness, more divisions, and a bigger gap between the richest and the poorest. And so I did everything I could. Of course, I take responsibility for putting the manifesto forward, but I have to say the manifesto was universally supported throughout our party and throughout our movement. So, as I said in my own count result last night, we don't give up on the eternal hopes of a more decent society and the urgent demand to make our contribution for a sustainable world. And that's exactly what our manifesto, our Green Industrial Revolution, would have done.
You talked about last night a period of reflection before you stand down. You wouldn't lead the party into another general election. When are you planning on standing down?
Well, the National Executive will have to meet, of course, in the very near future, and it's up to them. They'll make that decision, not me, but what I hope is there will be a period when we can have a good discussion within the party, and I think that's healthy and that's to be very welcome, and I hope those that were inspired by our manifesto will actually join the party and take part in that discussion. It's up to them to set a programme for when the election will take place. It'll be in the early part of next year.
It's quite often leaders stand down straight away after a general election defeat like this. I mean, this is a catastrophic defeat. Many people would expect you to stand down straight away.
I was elected to lead the party, and I think the responsible thing to do is not to walk away from the whole thing, and I won't do that. I will stay here until there has been somebody elected to succeed me, and then I will step down at that point.
You talked about being misrepresented. Do you feel you've been misrepresented in the media?
Yes, absolutely.
In what way?
Look at, if you analyse the coverage that's made of the Labour Party, you analyse the coverage that's made of me, you're looking at in the 80% and above of negative, hostile, or frankly just downright abuse of individuals, and character assassination and constant attacks on me and my family and others. And I just think we need to have some consideration of the effect this has on politics when the whole political debate is seen through the prism of personal abuse and personal attacks. I never indulge in personal abuse or attacks. I never attack anybody personally. And
yeah, I gotta say too that Trump getting into it with Greta Thunberg, doesn't that show how childish she is? I mean, really, Trump, you're gonna trade barbs with a 12, 13-year-old or something? I mean, anybody who's got like above a 9th grade mentality would say, so what? Who cares what she says? You know, especially if you knew you were right. Of course, he knows he's wrong, he's just pretending to be right. Or he doesn't know he's wrong and he's just stupid, right? But either way, it's childish. Childish. Totally childish. And I don't mean in a good way. I mean immature. And even when I was a kid, I was mature. You know, I was able to not act like a big baby most of the time. You know, jump up and down and throw tantrums. And he's like a naughty 9-year-old. You know, willing to engage in these silly fights. Of course, in his case, he's wrong about just about everything anyway. So, you know, the two go together, right? Being stupid and then obviously it's stupid to get in these stupid little fights with a 12-year-old.
Words I've often used is, I won't get into the gutter because I think our lives and our politics is too important for that.
Just two more questions. When the history books declare whether Jeremy Corbyn was for or against remaining in the EU, what should they say?
I hope the history books will say he's somebody that did campaign to remain in the referendum in 2016. We all know what the result of that was. And that after that, what I tried to do was negotiate an agreement with the EU so that we could have either remain or leave, but leave with a trade relationship with Europe. What I don't want to see is this country cut off from the continent of Europe because of the obvious trading relationships and all the personal and family relationships there are, because I think for us to become a sort of offshore tax haven of Europe would be a very, very retrograde step, and we cannot allow ourselves to become some sort of trading arm of the United States on the shores of Europe either.
Who should be your successor?
Well, that is not for me to decide. The party will elect somebody as a successor, and I look forward to supporting that person.
And what will you do?
I will be the MP for Islington North, and very proud to be the MP for Islington North, and I will continue to do the campaigning work I've done all my life on issues of social justice, on issues of housing, and issues of human rights around the world, and of course of environmental sustainability, because that is what I've spent my life doing, and that's what I'll spend the rest of my life doing.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next one is a flat-out Russian TV station. It's called Vesti News, and everything's in Russian, so it'll be with subtitles across the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to full screen and see how that works out for us. See if that helps you able to read the text. So
которая искажает события Великой Отечественной, на попытки оправдания нацистов и их пособников Россия ответит исторической правдой. Это сегодня на заседании Оргкомитета Победы, который готовится к проведению в 2020 года памяти и славы, пообещал Владимир Путин. Президент отметил, что в истории нет неудобных страниц, а самое главное сегодня – это забота и поддержка ветеранов. Репортаж Полины Ермолаевой.
Сохранение памяти о самой страшной войне в истории человечества и есть ответственность за будущее России. И кто бы мог подумать, что 75 победных лет спустя нам снова придется биться против перекраивания истории.
Попытки искажения этой правды исторической не прекращаются. К ним подключились не только наследники пособников нацистов. Теперь дело дошло до некоторых вполне респектабельных международных институтов и европейских структур. Но вы знаете наверняка, что недавняя резолюция...
So I can argue that, you know, the Russians and the Cubans and the Chinese and everybody have been victimized by the West, and, you know, that's the reason why they have, to a certain extent, a retaliatory response against their own people. You know, a police state. But in fact, if you go to these countries, you'll find out that the American propaganda is bullshit. You know, about how, oh, you have no freedom of speech and all this stuff. You just have it within reasonable bounds, right? You can't express yourself by lighting somebody on fire who you don't like. And that's what's going on when the police step in, and you've got these crazies on the right wing, whether it's in Russia or in Cuba or wherever, China, and it's just simply a flat-out police response. Now, I'm not saying that because we're human, right? So, and they're human, so maybe sometimes some of them are bad and they do bad things, but it doesn't really reflect a systematic problem. We all know that. I mean, this isn't brain surgery here, people, so we know how that kind of works. But in general, the Soviet Union was on the right side of history and morality. They, I don't know how many millions of people died because of the fucking Nazis, the Germans, right? So, you know, they had a right to be pissed off, and being pissed off is probably what eventually won them the war. And yeah, they marched all the way through to like Berlin. So, I have to say, when I listen to Putin and other world leaders, Cuba's president, and everywhere where there's Venezuela, when I listen to them, I hear them. You know, they're reality based, and you know, they have a right to run their country and keep us out. And by us, I don't mean me or you. I mean the you know, the neoconservatives and neoliberals who are trying to steal their country from them. It's not our fault that our oil is under your country. You know, shit like that.
Европейского парламента поставила фактически на одну доску и нацистских агрессоров, и Советский Союз. Чуть ли не обвиняет СССР наряду с нацистской Германией в развязывании Второй мировой войны, как будто забыли, кто напал на Польшу 1 сентября 1939 года и на Советский Союз 22 июня 1941. А те, кто пытается спорить с такой ни на чем реально не основанной беспардонной ложью, заранее обвиняют в информационной войне против демократической Европы. Это цитата. Наш ответ на ложь – это правда.
Now, isn't that undeniably the truth? I'm really ashamed that I can turn on Russian television and hear a guy like Putin that absolutely speaks to me because it's the truth. And I can't get the same out of my own country. Neoliberal Democrats, establishment Democrats, the Republicans, except for a few who, you know, there's always Republicans who are voted in who aren't twisted and weak.
Мы продолжим рассказывать о событиях, фактах Великой Отечественной войны, раскрывать и публиковать архивные материалы во всей их полноте. Складывается впечатление, что некоторые наши оппоненты то ли читать, то ли писать не умеют. Глаз у них нет, как будто не знают ничего.
Wow, he really nailed it there, didn't he? I mean, Western propaganda is just exactly like the Three Monkeys. No see, no hear, no, what? Well, anyway.
Убежден, в истории нет и не может быть невыгодных, неудобных страниц. Она нужна в совокупности, причем без всяких прикрас и изъянов.
А правда в глазах, словах, поступках наших ветеранов. Им, все выстоявшим, сегодня очень нужна поддержка.
Нам нужно вместе сделать все необходимое, чтобы, в принципе, исключить формальный, равнодушный подход к организации мероприятий, где бы они ни проходили. Везде есть свои герои Великой Отечественной войны, фронтовики и труженики тыла. Именно им нужно уделить самое высокое, пристальное, сердечное внимание и заботу.
Мы и регионы страны знаем каждого находящегося в очереди ветерана пофамильно. Хотела бы еще раз обратить внимание регионов, где есть еще небольшая очередь, работать максимально оперативно, индивидуально, не откладывая на другие периоды обеспечения жильем. Особенно обратив внимание на тех ветеранов, которые сегодня проживают в сельской местности.
У меня есть просьба к Татьяне Алексеевне. Мы к юбилейным датам, вообще к праздникам, помогали и поддерживали наших ветеранов, поэтому я вас прошу проработать и внести предложение по дополнительным выплатам для ветеранов Великой Отечественной и другим категориям граждан.
Нет в России семьи такой, где бы не памятен свой герой, но сколько еще страниц Великой войны остаются непрочитанными. Проект без срока давности рассекречивает архивные документы о зверствах нацистов на оккупированных территориях. Погиб каждый шестой мирный житель.
На основании архивных документов стало известно о том, как бойко шла торговля в Литве детьми, которые вывозились из Смоленской области. Их продавали на тяжелые работы.
В России больше 30 тысяч воинских захоронений, но еще 12 тысяч расположены за пределами страны.
Участились противоправные действия по отношению к захоронениям советских воинов. За рубежом акты надругательства и вандализма над памятниками постоянно совершаются на Украине. Такие факты имеют место в Германии, Польше, Чехии, Венгрии, Австрии, Эстонии, Латвии и других странах. В связи с этим Министерство обороны подготовило законопроект.
So in the Western countries, the fascists are, kicking over gravestones and desecrating graves of Russian soldiers who were buried in their country, who stood up to fascism, the Nazis, German Nazis, in their countries, and were buried there because they died, to free those countries. And yet, I know, because I'm an American, that my whole life I've been told that they were just fascists themselves conquering those countries. Well, if that's true, then why have they all left those countries and shrunk the Soviet Union down? And now all those countries are doing badly. They were doing better when they were part of the USSR and they had a safety net. But we'll never hear that.
Который вводит ответственность за уничтожение и осквернение мемориалов Великой Отечественной войны.
Еще предложение к 75-й годовщине утвердить новое почетное звание для городов. Есть 12 городов-героев, 45 городов воинской славы, но броню победы ковали в тылу.
Предлагается принять на федеральном уровне почетное звание «Город трудовой доблести». Такое звание может быть присвоено городам Российской Федерации, внесшим значительный вклад в обеспечение военных действий для достижения.
This time of year, it's no surprise to see when retailers see a spike in shoplifting. But executives with Home Depot say this year thefts are so bad it's cutting into their profit margin. And guess who they're blaming? Well, they're blaming the opioid crisis. Legal journalist Molly Barros, a contributor with America's Lawyer, is here now with more on this story. Hi, Molly.
Okay, so last January, February, actually December, January, and February, I spent 3 months in jail for something I didn't do. For doing this show, actually, is what I was really put in jail for. They twisted it around to be terroristic threatening. Bullshit. I never threatened anybody. But while I was in jail, I got the unique perspective of getting to find out what all the people in there were in there for. So they were all in there mostly for opioids and less for stealing, which is what this is all about here. And the root cause was because they are patriotic Americans. More so than us who don't go to jail. Because what they were really doing was protesting the system. So, they're like, fuck my boss, he's a dick. I'll quit my job and look for another boss. And I don't find one because my boss is a dick and he's made it pretty, he's obviously not going to be a good reference, right? So they decide, fuck this system, and they either use drugs to escape reality, which that only goes so far, right? At some point you need money for those drugs. So they either tried to deal, sell drugs to make money to support their habit, or steal. This is all simply protest. I know a lot of people out there can't understand that, but it is definitely that. And once they start, they get to like that system, even if they're in jail. It's just part of the price of escaping the system. When they're in jail, all they can talk about is ways to steal, ways to make cheap drugs you can sell. I mean, I had some guys telling me about how easily they could make, what was it? Oh, methamphetamines. And I was like, man, they're crazy. I would never snort that stuff. Because they're talking about using all these different chemicals and, I don't know what they said, because I didn't really pay that much attention to them. But they were using, and do you know that they know how to make some kind of drug out of Raid? The stuff you kill ants with? I mean, they've got a million ways. But I just want to say that, and I want to say that regardless of what bad people they've become and how they are likely to hurt other people, and yeah, that's bad, but that's a result of really that anger, and that anger doesn't come from them. It comes from the experience they've had as an American.
How are you?
Hey, Scotty, nice to hear your voice.
It's great to hear you. I'm just sitting here and I read through the story. I just have to wonder, why does Home Depot believe these thefts are tied directly to the opioid crisis?
I know, and it just seems to be a case of they just believe it. We don't really know why exactly they believe it, because the claim doesn't appear to be...
Well, that's not really true, because these people who steal from Home Depot and Walmart and places, they go to jail, and when they're caught and arrested and all the arrests and stuff, they end up in the system, and the system knows that they do drugs and that they steal, and so really, I mean, honestly, they're wrong here. I mean, what do you expect a couple of blonde women to be, or even their people who work there writing the stories, to really understand it? You can't understand it until you go to jail, live in a cell with 11 other guys and 180, 200 guys in the whole cell block, and listen to what they have to say. See, nobody's allowed to talk to them, and nobody's allowed to hear from them, even in jail, out of jail, whatever. It's like nobody's interested in hearing their point of view. They're the bad guys, right? I'm telling you, man, you need to, America needs to open up its mind. There's so much information available just directly from people, and our culture squashes it. It doesn't want to know, and we're never going to be able to deal with it if we don't want to know.
Be based on any studies, but they do blame organized crime as well for this big increase in stealing.
Oh man, there's not much organized crime. I mean, crime organizes itself outside of, you end up with people who fence stuff and supply the drugs and things like that. I mean, even the the anarchists are forced to organize, but there's not a lot of the organized crime really is the rich people. There's a few rich people who get into making money off of all these little people who steal from Walmart and do their drugs and stuff, and they manage to build themselves a little empire, and then you've got organized crime.
Welcome to Real News, folks. It's Mark Steiner. Great to have you all with us. As many of you may know, the Washington Post is releasing a 6-part series called the Afghanistan Papers, exposing the lies that were told not only to get us into this endless 19-year war, but lies told to perpetuate it, to keep the fight going, to lie to the public. Reminds me of the Pentagon Papers that Daniel Ellsberg released in 1971, showing the secrets that led to the widening of the Vietnam War and lies the public has been told to shore up support for that war. It didn't come in time to save the Vietnamese people who were murdered and killed, or the 50,000 of our own who died in battle. And these Afghan papers will not save those who have been devastated by the war either. Will they lead us to a questioning our leaders, to question why we go to war, to demand answers and change the way we operate this government to continue endless wars, wars without meaning, wars undeclared by the people of the United States? And we'll be producing a series of conversations about the Afghanistan Papers. Today, we welcome back to the Real News Iraq-Afghan War veteran, West Point graduate, and writer, Danny Sojournson. He's the author of a memoir and critical analysis of the Iraq War called Ghost Riders of Baghdad, Soldiers, Civilians, and the Myth of the Surge. And on the heels of the Afghan Papers that were released, he wrote, I Knew the Afghan War Was a Lie, for Truthdig. And Danny, welcome. Good to have you back with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So all this makes me think about the Pentagon Papers, the lies we were told back in the 60s that led us to the Vietnam War, that exploded this war, that affected all of our lives. The same lies are being told now. It's the overwhelming nature of how this establishment lies to us, the military lies to us, about these wars that were never declared. And then your piece was also so deeply personal because of the way the situation you were put in Afghanistan itself. So how do you tie these things together for us?
Well, you know,
Okay, so I guess what it comes down to with Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever, is do we want to keep the Taliban from coming back into power? Do we want Muslim extremism, fundamentalism out of power so bad? And to that I say, you know what? They may be extreme now, but if they're allowed to govern and do all their atrocities and shit because they believe in Sharia law and stuff, and that leads to throwing gays off of buildings and, all kinds of stupid shit. But if they're allowed to go through that phase, eventually they end up being like any other government, because sooner or later the people pressure them enough to stop doing the bad things that they're doing, and they mellow out, and the whole religion mellows out. As a matter of fact, we've radicalized the entire Middle East by basically, which is a Christian crusade of the West, and we're their proxy army. In reality, I mean, it's mostly Americans over there doing everything. I always like to learn from this lady. Maybe if
these invisible hearing aids could change your life. If you're suffering from premature hearing loss, the struggle could soon be over.
Like gardening like me, maybe you'll like this.
Hello friends, Miss Silla here. So today I'm going to be harvesting the Jerusalem artichokes.
Look how tall they got. Must be the worm castings. Remember, I pretty much fed the whole garden with worm castings and everything just got so big and grew so fast. So cannot wait to dig in there and see what we get. Let's get digging. So here are the main stalk or stems. We're going to dig them up, or actually maybe just cut them back first and I'll start digging. So remember, the Jerusalem artichoke is a cousin of the sunflower, so it's in the same family. That's why they have these tall stalks, and they pretty much get tall like the sunflowers, but the flowers are not as big as the mammoth sunflower varieties, but they are yellow. So I think I'm just gonna go and snap this back. I might be able to use this as a stake next season. Just twist that off. We'll just kind of cut these back. Look at this one, guys. Look at this. Nice yield from this one stalk. There's more in there actually that most likely fell off. Nice sized ones. It looks like we're going to get a nice harvest today. Wow, this is a lot. This is so much fun. See, look at that. Wow. Oh, there's a red potato in there. Look at that. Oh, more. Oh my goodness. There. So we're going to have plenty for eating and more for planting for our next season. It looks like they root pretty deep. Wow. Look at that. Okay, so far that's what we got from 2 plants. Going to the next section here, or the other 2 sides of the garden box. Oh my goodness. You guys see that? Wow. So on this one there were 3 plants, so maybe I've overcrowded them, but that's a nice yield. So if I space them out properly, I bet they'll be producing more. So right here again. Oh my goodness. This is so exciting. It's like I just let this grow for the season, didn't really take care of it, just, you know, give it some worm castings and just let it do its own thing. Okay, so I got 1 section left, the right side corner here and right side of the garden box. These were kind of smallish, but still produce, as you can see. Just toss it on that side. Oh my goodness, actually there are some red potatoes that I did not harvest. Oops, about 6 weeks ago. Looks like I missed some. Potatoes. Not sure how many pounds I have here. I still have more to dig up on that side of the box. So I never knew that I would get this much. Look at this, guys. This is amazing. And I think there were more over there underneath the strawberry plants, and it's starting to get dark, so I might have to come back here another day. I don't know how many pounds I have here. Look at that. I'm pretty astonished, and we'll be growing these for sure again. Just how much it produced. Such a prolific plant. I did better with these than my potatoes this year. So again, first time growing these, planted them last fall. I think I'm going to be leaving some in the ground, just mulch them, and they'll come back again next year and we'll get more artichokes. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for joining me today. Would love to know if you have any recipes using them, because the only thing I did with them last year was roasted them in the oven
put a little bit of herbs and garlic and pepper. So if you don't mind sharing your recipe, please leave a comment down below. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful day.
I wish I could garden like her. I mean, I do pretty good, but I can only get certain things to grow. I think it's mostly the soil, but I'm working on that. You know, I grow a lot of popcorn, a lot of sunflowers. They're easy to grow, but what I'd really like to grow is like, well, a lot of stuff, but like more expensive stuff, like herb gardens. Herb gardens would be good, or artichokes. God, they're so expensive at the store. I'd love to grow some. And you'd think they'd be easy to grow because I got shitty soil. I don't know. Anyway, if you like her, she's
let me know if you grew them.
Learn to Grow on YouTube. Or you can just go to my playlist. This is my playlist. And you can click on this and you can just go straight to... Ooh, I probably shouldn't have done that. Straight to her. Anyway. Now you want to talk about climate change. This is what climate change is all about. And it's awful. You're going to see awful stuff here. I mean, nature's always a little
шокирующие
bit...
кадры недели. Чукотка. Белые медведи взяли в заложники целое село. Более 50 мишек собрались близ заполярного поселка Рыр-Кайпий, где живут несколько сот человек. Чукотское море до сих пор никак толком не замерзнет, и медведи не могут уйти по льду охотиться на морского зверя. Вот в поисках пищи они подошли слишком близко к жилым домам. О том, что дальше, наш корреспондент Никита Березняков.
We're buffering here.
В районе мыса Кожевникова установилась необычайно теплая погода для начала декабря. К тому же сильные ветра разгоняют еще не окрепшие льды. Худые и голодные, взрослые и молодые звери, самки с медвежатами разного возраста сейчас собрались в окрестностях села Рыр-Кайпий. По подсчетам специалистов, всего около 60 особей. Сейчас в поисках пропитания медведи все ближе и ближе подбираются к людям.
В течение лета, когда я там был, там тоже 27 медведей собиралось, но они просто вели себя по-другому. Они были рассеяны, и вот так вот не наводили страха на людей, когда вот сейчас пришли голодные, и все кучей, как поросята около корыта, собрались около этих моржей, и, конечно, кажется, что просто ужас какой-то.
В конце лета на мысе Кожевникова образуется огромное лежбище тихоокеанских моржей. Порой их количество достигает десятков тысяч.
Вы видите, сзади меня находятся уже погибшие моржи. Моржата, большие моржи. Их по побережью везде уже разбросало.
Мимо такого обилия пищи равнодушно пройти хищники не могут. Когда лед крепкий, белые медведи уходят далеко в море и охотятся на тюленя, нерпу или морского зайца. В ледяной воде они самые лучшие охотники. Но сейчас, когда уйти из поселка они не...
Boy, doesn't that make you feel bad seeing them struggle like that? I mean, usually they can just swim and come up on an iceberg or something.
Могут вынуждены отыскивать осенние запасы. Задача волонтеров — отогнать хищников и убрать медвежью еду с территории поселка, иначе косолапых будет еще больше.
Сейчас водитель на кальмаре подъедет сюда, мы зацепим этого моржа стропами и утащим туда на косу.
Каждый вечер жители села Рыр-Кайпий выходят на патрулирование. В ночное время белые медведи заходят в село в поисках пищи.
Медведи ходят сюда. Вот мы видим, вот здесь школа у нас в близости, интернат, дома.
В селе отменены все общественные мероприятия. На своей снегоходной технике жители охраняют поселок. Вечернее время самое опасное. К ночи улицы пустеют.
Народ не ходит по улицам сейчас. Ходят медведи. Они хоть и ходят по берегу, по периметру поселка, но, не дай бог,
Помочь жителям села Рыркайпи пообещали пограничники. В ближайшее время будут закуплены патроны и отпугивающие средства. По прогнозам синоптиков, прочный лед установится в этом районе не раньше, чем через 2 недели. И только тогда медведи смогут уйти. Никита Березняков, Арсений Гусев, Максим Жолобов, Вести Чукотка.
Welcome to the future of real estate investing.
Shut up. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would find that terrifying. I mean, polar bears, God, just rip you apart without even meaning to.
One of the main issues now facing Boris Johnson's new government will be the future of the United Kingdom itself. Let's take a look at what happened in Scotland and Northern Ireland. The SNP swept up 48 seats, gaining 13 on the night, making them by far the largest party. The Conservatives held on to 6 MPs but lost 7. The Liberal Democrats have 4 seats and Labour, who once dominated Scotland, have just 1 MP. In Northern Ireland, the DUP have 8 seats, losing 2, including Nigel Dodds, their Westminster leader. Sinn Féin has 7 and the SDLP 2, which means there are now more nationalist MPs than unionists for the first time ever. Here's Jane Dodge with more.
Boris Johnson isn't the only one celebrating a landslide. The SNP has won 48 of Scotland's 59.
So in Scotland, just the opposite happened. And they want to stay in the EU, and this lady here, who you just saw doing her little dance or whatever, she says that you know, Scotland's going to do whatever it wants, and I don't know. I mean, is it like secession? Is it like they're seceding to the EU? Sure seems like it. I suppose it'll set up a nice little comparison, right? We'll have Scotland, and we'll see what happens with Scotland if they stay in the EU. Because she's certainly saying they are. Here, I'll jump to
In the last 100 years, we've changed locations,
added brands, even changed our logo.
But
just breaking away now, going live to Scotland, where Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister, of course, leader of the SNP, is...
campaign. I believe and I hope that we can, in Scotland, now agree on 2 fundamental points. Firstly, it is now clear beyond any doubt that the overwhelming majority of people in Scotland do want to remain in the European Union. That verdict was first delivered in the referendum in 2016. It was reinforced in the general election of 2017. It was strengthened in the European election earlier this year.
Okay, so basically she's going to give Britain the big fuck you. We're Scotland, we're going to do what we want. And the Scots have always had that side of them. They've fought the British so many times. Now here I want to show you how the corporate media in Britain treats Jeremy Corbyn and tries to shame him because of his loss into, you know, talking about kicking a man while he's down, into going more centrist. And the same thing happens here with Bernie Sanders. I mean, they constantly pick on him and push him around and belittle him.
Now, it could hardly have been a worse night for Labour, as one by one that so-called red wall of rock-solid heartlands crumbled into dust. And now, after the worst result for the party in living memory, and in this radically different political landscape, the political recriminations have already begun. In a moment, we'll be live from Wakefield, where Labour's Mary Craig lost her seat. But first, here's Jane Death.
Don Valley in South Yorkshire, and the Conservatives removed another brick in Labour's supposed red wall.
a former mining community turning to the Tories, leaving Caroline Flint, MP for 2 decades, tearful and angry, saying Jeremy Corbyn hadn't spoken to working class voters.
What is the point of the Labour Party if we don't respect and represent those voices? People we have not listened to or respected enough.
What happened tonight for Labour?
I just want to have a bit of time.
Can I just ask you, is it time for Jeremy Corbyn to step down now?
Yeah. Yes.
Caroline Flint had warned Brexit voting areas might not stay loyal to Labour.
Time and time again on the doorstep, people said, I like you, I'm a Labour through and through. My dad was a miner, my granddad was a miner, he'd be turning in his grave if I didn't vote Labour, but I just can't vote Labour whilst that man is your leader. But alongside that as well was Brexit and the concern about the Labour Party standing in the way of getting Brexit through and moving on.
This was one of 59 seats lost by Labour, where campaigning on an end to austerity and the party's traditional trump card, the NHS, was outweighed by Brexit. The Conservatives have bulldozed Labour's traditional defences in the Midlands and the North. The biggest swing to the Tories of 18% was in Bassetlaw, where the Conservatives won more than half the vote. Even Bolsover, Labour since the seat was created and represented by Dennis Skinner for half a century, turned blue. And Bishop Auckland, Labour for most of the last 100 years, gave a Conservative MP an 8,000 majority. Bolsover voted 70% to leave the EU, one reason for the Labour loss, but another came up too.
I don't feel like Jeremy Corbyn would make a good Prime Minister, just from some things he said in the past and his previous record on some things.
Don't like Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn keeps his Islington seat, but for how long his position as Labour leader? He called the election results very disappointing.
I will remain the MP for Islington North, and I'm proud to represent the people of Islington North, and I'm proud in Parliament and outside that we will forever continue the cause for socialism, for social justice, and for a society based on the needs of all rather than the greed of a few.
John McDonnell this morning blamed a Brexit brick wall, not a failure of Corbynism.
If you look at what's happened in most of the seats, particularly in the northern seats, the votes shift has been from Labour to the Brexit party around the Tories. So, yeah, I think we just couldn't get through the Brexit argument, basically.
So this was actually all about Jeremy.
Now ex-Labour MP Ruth Smeeth, beaten by the Conservatives in Stoke-on-Trent North, said Jeremy Corbyn's unwillingness to come down on one side or the other on Brexit cost her her seat.
It's the most important issue facing the country for a generation. But they didn't understand what our position on it was. So how could we have had, on the most important issue facing the country, our response being a fudge?
Labour is still the biggest party in Wales, but it lost 6 seats. The Conservatives winning some of their big targets, like Wrexham.
Wrexham has always been a Labour consistency, but they wouldn't have voted for Labour because of Jeremy Corbyn.
I voted Labour all my life. First time, I voted Tory this time.
Labour did win in places like Middlesbrough and Stockton North, and it took Putney off the Conservatives, where the winner, Fleur Anderson, noted it was a bright light on a dark night. But in the cold light of day, the question now is what next for Labour? Jeremy Corbyn might be on the way out, but where does the party go now?
Well, let's go live now to our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon, who's in Wakefield, one of that swathe of seats which switched from red to blue. Claire.
Well, yeah, Wakefield is one of those places that makes up the red wall we heard so much about during the election campaign. Places stretching from North Wales right across to the Humber. But now that red wall has been replaced by red islands dotted across a sea of blue. It's hard to overstate the scale of this political...
Okay, so this wasn't the video with... I mean, it did shame him, but the one I saw, there was a reporter, a guy, and he was just hounding Corbyn in an interview, you know, basically saying he'd failed and that the asking him repeatedly, don't you think the party has to go to the right? Maybe it's this one.
One of the main issues now facing Boris Johnson's new government will be the future.
We saw this.
And the SDLP too, which means there are now more nationalist MPs than unionists.
Which I am a very proud member and have been since I was old enough to join. If we don't reflect on this result and do something about it, then the Labour Party is going to be in a very, very bad place. And the only result of that is that we let every single person in this country down.
The despondent Nigel Dodds arrived at the count in North Belfast to be told he'd lost his seat to Sinn Féin after nearly 2 decades at Westminster. It was one of 2 seats the DUP lost. The other, South Belfast, was won by the SDLP.
At least there's some good news in
Former Prime Minister Abdelmajid Tebboune has won the presidential election. This has been confirmed in the past hour by the electoral.
I mean, this guy's another neoliberal, but better than the dictator they had there in Algeria. And remember, the Arab Spring started in Algeria when a guy who had a cart that he ran around selling stuff, selling food or something, vegetables, burned himself to death. Sad. So these are Telesur, and they're half-hour shows. They cover the news.
Exit polls give a big majority to the Conservative Party in Britain's general election.
So they're going to cover a lot of the same thing. I'm going to look at what's happening in Syria today. Let me refresh this video. That's not really refreshed. Okay, so what we got going on here today? 3 children were killed and 4 others injured by a landmine in Dara. So the death continues. We'll see what's happening with the Kurds up here. So these are, Sunni that are rising up in hope that Erdogan and Turkey will help them. And they are rising up. And the United States will always call them ISIS. And that's bullshit. Because they're Syrians. ISIS is, Islamic State in Syria is more an Iraqi thing. The Iraqis who were pushed out, al-Baghdadi's Iraqi in American prison camps, radicalized him. That's ISIS. And, look at it from my point of view. These people were beaten and tortured. What do you think? They're going to be nice guys? After being subjected to, just the worst kind of brutality from American forces. Anyway, the Sunni are rising up against the Kurds because the Kurds, with the help of the Americans and American air power, and some on the ground, were able to take all of this in part of Syria. And it's 80% Sunni. Do you really think you could occupy this area? It's all Sunni. Well, I mean, you did with the help of American air power, and it was brutal. I mean, they bombed Raqqa into the ground, into the Stone Age. And see, all these are prison camps, still held by Sunnis, or held up in there by the Kurds. And if anything, it's probably created a lot more animosity between the Sunni and the Kurds. And the Kurds are Sunni too, I think. Maybe some of them are Shia, I don't know. But Kurds isn't a religion. You know, they're still Sunni. What happened? Oh, yeah. A child died in the camp. And, I mean, these are horrid conditions. And it's raining now, and the cold weather's coming, and they don't have any way to heat their tents or anything. Syrian government forces checkpoint near Qamishli airport prevented a U.S. military convoy from passing through, entering the this English is kind of broken. U.S. vehicles were en route towards the Russian base in the area. So, you know, you've got the Syrian army and the United States, supposedly mortal enemies, right? Hardly. I mean, they're all bumping into each other here, and you don't see any fighting between them, just between the Turks and the Kurds and the Syrian Arab army, the beast Bashar al-Assad, or Assad, I forget sometimes. So here you've got a Russian-Turkish control, but really, what is it? I mean, it's just some Russians and some Turkish vehicles going up and down the road. In the meantime, the Kurds are controlling all this area, and Erdogan's getting more and more pissed off each day. I think sooner or later he's just going to go in. Here you've got the Syrian army is on the highway, and I know the Turks are letting them do that, so I guess they've got some kind of agreement there. Here's another camp, but it's in the Turkish area. See, Erdogan wants to take all of this land, basically, and give it back to the Sunnis, which it's theirs. The Kurds don't even have a hope in an election of having much representation, because they're not a representational proportional part of the population. Let's see what's happening here. I didn't get to read that. Mazen Ghassan, a young man, died from wounds after somebody put a bomb in his car. And of course the horror, it's not as bad today as it usually is. But yeah, they're still bombing, you know. Syrians are bombing every day. This is just today. So only 5 attacks by Syrian and Russian forces. In the meantime, of course, this would be Al-Nusra. They're called HGS now. Hayat Sham. I can't remember their name, how their name's pronounced. Anyway, they targeted some, when it says pro-Assad forces, that means usually Iranian or Hezbollah. You know, they talk about how there's foreign fighters, and in fact there aren't that many. But Syria, I mean, no, not Syria. The beast Bashar, he's got all kinds of foreign fighters. He's got Iranians. He's got American-trained Iraqi troops. They're called PMUs. And by the way, there was something I wanted to point out. Since we did our thing in Iraq, now Iran is able to transit through Iraq, because there's a pro-Iranian Shia government in Iraq, and America isn't allowed to be out in all these other places. They're just in the green zone, I think now, 5,000 or 10,000 troops. Maybe some are out and about, but I think Iran has told them that they really don't want them, don't want to have much of a footprint. They don't want the people of Iraq seeing American soldiers. So what's happened is Iran feels free to travel through here, and of course after they're in Syria they can get into Lebanon with Hezbollah, and they've always supported Hezbollah. So you get a lot. You've got down here where the stuff flows through, you've got some Iranian compounds, and Israel's been bombing them like every week, and they keep on building them, and they've got a border crossing, I guess it would be this one right here, that they control, and they keep the flow of weapons and whatever they can, probably trucks full of oil flowing through into Syria. Anyway, there's not too much happening in Syria today. I mean, they had a huge battle last week. Oh, and I've got all that in my bookmarks. But I'm kind of tired of doing this right now, so I've pretty much covered everything. I hope you enjoyed this. It's Progressive News with Martin Drummond. And that's all for now. Oh, and have a nice weekend if I don't get back on here.